let me move on to the subject at hand, which is what the government has announced today. Will your party be supporting those measures?
Well, first of all, I think you saw Finance Minister 6 days ago come out of a fancy hotel in Vancouver to say that they need to not spend or restrain their spending. And then today, on the other side of the country, in front of an even fancier hotel, you have a government that is continuing the inflationary deficits. They haven't committed to reducing taxes, and if they do, if the Prime Minister takes the challenge from the new leader, then we'll support that measure. But this is not it.
So unpack that for me, because first of all, are you saying that essentially if the government doesn't reduce taxes or cut taxes, which would add to inflationary pressures, your government won't support, or your party rather won't support these supports for low-income Canadians?
Look, this is going to drive inflation further. We've seen the government continue to spend.
But people need help.
Continue to spend, and people can get help. The minister who is standing in front of a luxury resort said that inflation went down. It went down because of gas prices. The government is actually going to triple the carbon tax. There are people who cannot afford to fill their cars. They can't afford new work boots. They can't afford nutritious food to feed their families, and their kids cannot afford to live in the neighborhood that they grew up, even buy a place. This measure of $500 a year, which again is $42 a month, doesn't even pay for a couple days of rent where I'm from. So this isn't.
That's not it, right? There's dental care in there. There's a GST rebate. Like, there are a number of low-income. Just let me finish. There are low-income Canadians who are really hurting right now. And is your party really prepared to tell them you shouldn't get extra support because it might drive up inflation more, and then the government should cut taxes because that also will drive up inflation?
Our leader has been talking about this for 2.5 years, and 2 days after he's elected, they finally turn their attention to affordability measures for Canadians. These are not the right ones. This is going to continue to drive up inflation, the inflationary deficit, and the inflationary taxes on Canadians is exactly the wrong approach.
Okay, we'll revisit that in a second. I want to bring in Mr. Blakey into the conversation because a lot of what the government is promising now is stuff that your party had proposed or even put into its deal with it. But like your colleague just pointed out, what the government announced today is also like $42 a month to help with rent. Why hasn't your party pushed the government to go further if, in fact, those supports are so necessary as your party has characterized them in the past?
Well, what I'd say is this, is first of all, it took a lot of pushing to get them to act on the Canada Housing Benefit. It took a lot of pushing for them to reverse position where just 18 months ago they were voting with the Conservatives against dental care. And not that long ago, just in the spring session, they were voting with the Conservatives against GST rebate. So we have been pushing, and this is the result of that pushing and making the government do something finally that's going to help support people. So we're happy to talk about what more we can do. And New Democrats have a lot of ideas about what an NDP government would do differently from a Liberal government. But these are the things that we've been able to force them to do in the context of the Parliament that Canadians elected just a year ago. But the GST rebate is going to reach a lot of people, and it's the right kind of measure because these are folks that are not able to drive inflation. They're just trying to buy the same things that they were buying 6 months ago that they no longer can afford because the price of those things has gone up. So this helps them meet those price increases and buy the things that they needed to buy for their family and were able to 6 or 12 months ago. So this is not an inflation driving increase at all.
Right, but
and in fact, a tax cut would apply to a much broader base of people, including people with a lot higher incomes who could then take that as disposable income to have more money chasing fewer goods, depending on.
But on the question of whether this actually helps people as much as it should, when you refer to the parliamentary context within which this is as far as you could push the Liberals to go, that context was created by your party by agreeing to prop them up for another 3 years.
Well, the parliamentary context was created by Canadians electing minority government, and we've been trying to use the leverage that we have with our 25 seats to maximize the government doing things that are actually going to help people, which we know when Liberals are left to their own devices, that takes a really long time if it comes at all. And we've been able to not only establish them moving forward on some important measures like those that were announced today, but to also push their timelines up. So I think this is an example of a party with a mandate to fight for people, getting things done in a minority parliament. We're going to continue to push for those things.
Respectfully, Mr. Blakey, and pardon me the interruption, but you didn't really force them to do it faster because you tried in May and they just said no. And now all of a sudden, as I asked the minister many times, they've changed course. I understand that you're saying that you're trying to leverage your position, but you've essentially created a situation in which the Liberals think that they have almost carte blanche to take as long as they want because they can count on your support.
When we had that vote, that wasn't the end of the advocacy. We didn't throw up our hands. So we continue to apply pressure everywhere we can. And there will be times when that happens relatively more quickly. And when we have certain defeats, like the vote last time, when the Liberals refused to vote with us and to move ahead on that, we will continue to apply pressure to the government in every way we can to get things done for people. That's what we were elected to do. It's what we're going to continue to do. And there will be times where we don't get what we want. I would say, in respect of these affordability issues, particularly when it comes to housing, there are things that need to happen. Like, this wasn't a crisis that was created overnight. It's been 20 years or more in the making. There are things that we need the government to do in order to be able to address the long-term issues in the housing market, which are not on a trajectory to really get much better. Prices will come down a little bit with higher interest rates, but they're coming down from extraordinary highs. They're not going to get to where they're actually affordable for people unless we're seeing major investment in social housing, unless the government creates an acquisition fund for nonprofits to acquire many affordable units that are coming on the market because the federal government is letting the grants that they used to supply so that these places could provide affordable rents. They're letting those expire, and real estate investment trusts are buying them up. Those are the kinds of long-term policy actions we continue to not be able to get the Liberals to move on, that we're fighting for. And it's the difference between what an NDP government would be doing and what the Liberal government is doing under pressure from our party.
Okay, I just have a few seconds left, Ms. Lantsman. Last question to you. I just want to make sure you explain to Canadians, why it's necessary to predicate support of these measures, which I do hear from a lot of Canadians, like they need some extra help right now. Why your party would not consider supporting them at the, based on the possibility of a tax cut. I understand the point of view that Canadians don't want to see extra taxes, but a tax cut would add more spending power, would continue to drive up inflation. Why not support this, help Canadians now, and then push the government on the issues you're speaking of?
Every dollar that is spent on this is going to drive inflation up. That means every dollar that is used for this is going to evaporate by increased inflation. And the only thing that is going to put a stop to this is to eliminate the inflationary deficits and commit to no new tax increases. We know they're coming. We know that a payroll tax is coming. We know that the carbon tax will be tripled. And that's what Canadians have told us, and that's exactly what we're going to stand up for in the House of Commons.
But again, it's I understand the point around no new taxes. I do understand that, but this is going to help low-income Canadians. It's not a massive amount of money compared to other spending. I'm not even saying that spending isn't inflationary and that there is a valid criticism there. But at this moment in time, when you know and your party is talking about how much Canadians are hurting, is this the time to say we're not going to support stuff that might help?
This is the time to actually attack inflation. And again, every dollar spent is going to be evaporated. Every one of those $42 a month that somebody in Toronto gets to pay 4 days or 3 days of rent is going to be erased by the continued spending. These guys have to stop the inflationary deficits, and they have to commit to no new taxes. That's what's going to stop inflation.
Okay.